All right, the last time we left off, we were talking about how LBJ pretty much had been smeared by the country and he was just tired of the war. He was tired of being president, so he refuses to run again. And it looked like RFK or Robert Kennedy was going to win the Democratic nomination and then win the presidency. But then he got shot. And Richard Nixon decides that he can take advantage of this political chaos and come in and try to win the election of 1968. And Nixon's running against a Democratic Party that's split. You have Hubert Humphrey, who is a Democrat, and then you have an American independent who came from the old South, George Wallace. Remember, George Wallace was refusing to allow students to go to school, things like that. And so Nixon says, you know what, let's all come together. And he also says, bring us together. Let's also end this war, get a peace with honor type of thing. And you can see the election results here. The country was very split. You look at the popular vote. Richard Nixon at 43.4, Hubert Humphrey at 42.7%. However, though, the electoral numbers is what matters, and you can see Richard Nixon wins with 301. George Wallace got 13.5% and claimed victory in the southern states right here who were not happy about the new civil rights movement, things like that. They felt like the Democratic Party had turned on them. All while this is happening, a very tragic event happened in 1968 known as the My Lai Massacre. We had a group of American soldiers out searching for the Vietnamese. They were pretty much wore down, they were battle fatigued. They should not have been out there. They were at the point of breaking and they broke, they snapped. And these U.S. soldiers underneath Officer Calley are going to kill between 347 to 504 unarmed citizens of South Vietnam. Kelly just gives the order, says kill them all, and these guys just pretty much snap. They kill everybody. These people are not fighting back. They're trying to run, trying to save their own lives, and all this was kind of swept underneath the rug. And reporters had been told about it, but they still couldn't believe it. And when they went out there and actually started investigating it, they found that it really did happen. They did find some pictures, uh, as you can see right here. These pictures are showing that kids, women, all being killed in this war, being massacred. Uh, Kelly is going to get into a lot of trouble. This incident will eventually be learned of, and the American public are going to really dislike this war even more. And a lot of the soldiers are going through these PTSDs. They're coming home. They're not the same person. And PTSDs has always been around, but these soldiers are more willing to talk about it instead of just bottle it up. And they're also not getting the heroes welcome home anymore. When they're coming home, a lot of times they're being called baby killers, killing these women, getting spit on, all kinds of things like that. The things in Vietnam were not going well for our soldiers and for the people of Vietnam, and also they were not going good here at home. And let's look at some of the things that are happening. Now, Nixon's first approach in Vietnam is an idea called Vietnamization. Vietnamization is an idea of withdrawing our U.S. troops while maintaining South Vietnam as a non communist state. And to do this, South Vietnamese needed better equipment, they needed better training, and so we would be the ones that gave that to them. And as our boys get out, they take over the war, they will be responsible. He called this a peace with honor. He ran for it in 1968. He stands by it in his first term. And he'll go and try to get us out of this war as fast as he possibly can, but while maintaining some kind of an honor. The last thing that our GIs wanted was to feel like this was all for nothing. And a lot of them will feel like that at the end because Vietnam will just become one country instead of two, and so containment will not work here. And then Nixon got tired of, you know, countries like Cambodia and Laos allowing the North Vietnamese to use the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So he authorizes the invasion of Cambodia. A lot of troops will invade into Cambodia, and when the American public finds out about this, they are going to riot. They're going to start tons of protests. One of the key protests that we'll see is here at Kent State. In Kent State, is basically saying we do not like this expansion of the war, and some college protesters will be killed by the National Guard who was sent there to pretty much stop it. We've got a picture here. You had an assignment on it. The photo and the document have been altered, changed some. You can see they did it because it looks like this woman's like got a post in her head or something like that. Um, so let's talk about that peaceful of honor from 71 to 75. And things just get worse for the United States. As you can see here, a document is going to get leaked out by Daniel Ellsberg. And this document is known as the Pentagon Papers. The Pentagon Papers basically say that the United States was hiding a lot of information from the United States, particularly the Johnson administration, even the Kennedy administration, about Vietnam. And these documents are saying that, look, this idea of the domino theory and Vietnam being vital for us are not really true. And a primary reason for fighting over there is to eliminate communism, but to avoid a humiliating defeat. And we are going to have a court case of the New York Times versus the United States. The New York Times was the one that leaked all these papers or published them anyways. And so the American public's getting all this and they are distrusting the war even more. So let's talk about that peace process. Peace process eventually happens around 1972. Henry Kissinger is going to go over there and work out a deal. He's going to do a lot of pressuring with the Chinese and different governments like that. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. And we are also attacking North Vietnam because they are attacking South Vietnam. So we're going to do a lot of bombing. Once the American public finds out that we don't know exactly what targets we're hitting, they're going to cry out and protest. And so the United States is going to have to back down. By 73, we will enter what is known as the Paris Peace Accords. And this is when the United States and North Vietnam reach an agreement to stop. North Vietnam agrees to stay out of South Vietnam and all that. And that works out quite well. But remember, the Vietnamese, they always attack, get defeated, and then go back to hiding, rebuild, and they are eventually going to come back in 1975. They will roll right into South Vietnam, heavily equipped, and take it over. And so we're going to see a very famous image here, the fall of Saigon, which is in South Vietnam, where all the American people and some people from South Vietnam who are up there high in the government are trying to get out, save their own lives. And a lot of American equipment that's over there is just going to be thrown in the water, sea, whatever the case may be, blown up. So the North Vietnamese, which will eventually become just Vietnam, will not have a control of it. This happens underneath Joe Ford. Joe Ford had an opportunity to get us back into Vietnam, and he decided, no, we're not going to do it. We've already lost too much there, and the American public probably not going to like it if we go anyways. So let's talk about the legacy of Nam. The legacy of Nam, basically, this thing's going to cost us about $150 billion in 1960 money, which is a lot of money. And we're going to have over 58,000 American deaths. Over 3 million total Vietnamese will die in this war. A lot of that's just from bombing. This is considered to be the first military defeat, even though really we never were defeated militarily. We were defeated politically, economically, but never a military defeat. We didn't lose a single battle. A lot of disrespect to troops returning home. And, we got a quote here. That was the feeling in the air that we were unclean. And these soldiers felt like they came home and they tried everything to win this war and it just didn't happen. And a lot of people, kind of looking down on them and they didn't like that. They wanted that heroes welcome home, much like their fathers got in World War II, or maybe their grandfather or uncle or somebody got, and they're not getting it. Also, with the legacy of Nam, we're going to see the American people becoming ever more distrustful of the government. We got the Pentagon Papers that come out showing that this really wasn't lining up, that credibility gap widens, and the American people do not like how the government has lied to them. And so every time the government does something from now on, they're kind of like, are you lying to us or telling us the truth? Then also, we're going to have a couple other events, which we'll talk about in the next unit, where the government just covered up all of Watergate and things like that. And this is also going to lead to the War Powers Act. The War Powers Act decided to take away that presidential power that it had given Johnson and Nixon and everybody else going forward, to make sure that the president pretty much had to go to Congress and get things done before he can pretty much just go abuse power. And we kind of saw where Congress was complaining about this year with President Trump going into Iran and having that high-ranking military officer killed without letting them know. They were saying, "Look, you are abusing the War Powers Act." So in the end, Ho Chi Minh wins. His famous quote is, "If we have to fight, we will fight. You will kill 10 of our men, and we will kill one of yours. And in the end, it will be you who gets tired of it." Now let's switch gear to a couple of loose things that we did not really go over. Most of this was either covered by commentary or just somewhere in these video notes. But one thing that I know that we did not go over was the M16 versus the AK-47. The M16 is a great assault rifle. However, though, when it gets into really bad conditions like wet conditions or it gets dirty, it's very hard to operate without it malfunctioning. However, though, the AK-47, which is being used by the Vietnamese, you can throw that thing in the dirt, mud, whatever you want to throw it in. You can abuse the crap out of it, and it's still going to function like it should. It's not going to jam up. It's just going to cycle right through them shells. So a lot of American soldiers, if they got the opportunity to put down their M16 and get AK-47, sometimes they would. And everything else, I think we pretty much have covered fairly well. Now let's go here. We did talk about much of this, but these last 2 points I want to go ahead and expand on a little bit more. Nixon believed in something known as the silent majority. And the silent majority is what he believed that most people were. They were not out there, protesting. That the loud minority had more voice because, they're more vocal. But most Americans stayed home, went to work, supported the war, and they just not go out there and protest. So that's the silent majority. And then we got Henry Kissinger. I mentioned him earlier. He is National Security Advisor and Secretary of State. He's the one that gets all these deals done, and he's the one that goes out there and makes things work. And so we were talking about the Paris Peace Accords. One thing I did not cover was that U.S. prisoners, POWs, would be released within 60 days. A lot of these guys did get released. Some of them did not, though. And we are going to go ahead and talk about this because this is pretty much it. The foreign policy underneath Nixon. Nixon believed in something known as détente. And détente is a word for easing of tension, particularly the Cold War tensions. And Nixon wanted a direct line of contact with the USSR, China, other Soviet nations, or communist nations, I should say, to kind of work out things instead of just letting them escalate and build up. And so Nixon's going to get this done. Now, one of the things that Nixon also does is something known as SALT Treaty. SALT Treaty pretty much is an agreement just to limit nukes. It works out quite well, makes things better with us in the USSR. However, though, Nixon is going to improve relations with China. He's going to actually go to China. He'll send Kissinger over there. He'll go over there, and they will actually make deals, and they will end pretty much that trade embargo that was happening. And Nixon looked at it like, look, if we can get into China, we have a huge customer base, and we can make a lot of money. Chinese like this idea because they were like, look, these Americans will buy all of our stuff from us now, and we'll make a lot of money. And Chinese, as we know, pretty much won that one. This did worry the USSR or the Soviet Union. So it kind of drove a wedge between the Soviet Union and China. And when China has to pick a side, they look to us because we are the ones that are going to provide them with a lot of money. And the USSR at that point in time, pretty much self-reliant. They would get stuff from China, but not nearly as much what Americans would be getting in the future. All right, that's pretty much it for Vietnam. If you have any questions, let me know. Here to help. Anyways, tests will be up next week. Take care. You will also have your World War II review test up next week as well, and we'll be probably talking about Nixon and stuff that's happening here at home. Enjoy your weekend and have fun.